It was a great turnout. Thank you all for coming. It was a very successful workshop. As you know, the planning board is going through the process of updating master plan for the town. It's supposed to be done every 5 to 10 years. It's been about 8 years. Because of all the changes that have occurred over the last several years, we thought it was a good time to do an update. Taking on Tara Danford as a consultant for helping us do this. She's been in the business of town planning for 30 years or more, working with several towns in the North Country Council. So she's going to be handling the meeting tonight. We're trying to get as much input as we can from the townspeople to incorporate into the update of the master plan. And so I'll turn the meeting over now to Tara.
So, for those who don't know, Terry's the planning board chair. He failed to say that, I think. So he's really running the show, but I'm going to stand in. So everybody should have an agenda and 3 index cards and a pen. If you don't, there's a couple more. Hopefully everybody signed in because we really want to be able to brag about how many people came out for this meeting tonight. So the master plan, can everybody hear me in the back? All right. Right. The master plan is basically a plan for the future development of the community. It's the only required task of a planning board. There are a lot of other things a planning board does, but having a master plan is the one requirement under state law. And it's a prerequisite for having zoning. To have zoning, you have to have vision part of a master plan and a land use part of the master plan. And there's a logic to that. Before you can have zoning, you need to know what you want to accomplish with it. What kind of development do you want? Where do you want each different kind of land use? Do you want it all close together? Do you want it spread out? Are there other things that you want to set aside and not have developed? In a community like this, the recreation facilities are an important attribute to plan around. When, there's that poster that said, how do you know what you're on the right path? We don't know where you're going. That's really what the master plan is to decide where you're going as a community. When I did my first master plan 30 years ago, you're flying by the seat of your pants when you're entry level, right? I did it like all the other master plans. It had a chapter for land use, a chapter for natural resources, one for transportation, one for historic preservation. Each one had its goals and objectives. You did a needs analysis and then made recommendations. But I pretty soon thought to myself, well, we don't think that way as people, and we really don't want our community to plan that way. Don't we want the community to think about what kind of development they want before they put the sewer line in? And, where they want to encourage development before they make a road bigger? It's certainly how we plan for our own yards, right? We don't want the driveway in before we decided where the house is going. How do we know it's going to hang together? So I think as planners, as a planning community, we all kind of started thinking like that. And eventually the state law was changed. So it said you have to have a vision in your master plan. And the master plan needs to start with that. And it needs to be based on what the planning board heard from the public in some way or in several ways. So the planning board was tasked with trying to articulate the vision of the community in order to then decide, well, how do we get there? Here's the vision, how do we get there? And I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by the vision and what kind of community. Let me just go through the agenda a little bit. So that's our master plan. We're going to do 2 exercises and have great refreshments I see in between them. First, I'm going to ask everybody, the reason for the 3 index cards is I want you to put one kind of thought on each card, not sentences, but just 1, 2, or 3 words about what do you love most about And I'll give you an example that you can't possibly use. Like, suppose I'm doing this in Boston. Some people might say access to the ocean. That might be one of the things they love most about Boston. One might be the kind of arts and theater district. It might be the great subway system. Those are things people might love about Boston. So we're looking for what you love about Waterville Valley. And then, so you'll be doing that, and I'll be trying to organize all your thoughts into logical categories that we'll then use for the discussion part of the evening. And that's why you get to have a refreshment break pretty early on in the meeting rather than halfway through, because I need time to do that. And then we'll see, how we have 6 or 7 categories, and we'll kind of divide the time up and see how many minutes we should spend on each category. And I'm gonna just ask people to be brief on the cards, and we'll talk more about the discussion when we get to it. But you can write a sentence, but I'm not gonna use a sentence. I'm gonna grab one thought from it in order to see, where the commonalities are. What are the things that a lot of people care about? Yep, questions?
If this is done every 10 years, 8 years ago, whenever it was done, and we are where we are today, how successful was that master plan to get to where we are now?
I can't answer to that. That wasn't my assignment. My assignment was to collect the information tonight that I need to draft a vision statement for the planning board to start with. That would be my job. So I'll let everybody write on their index cards again. What do you love most? What's a priority? What's a feature of quality in Waterville Valley? What do you want the planning board to use as their lens when they think about recommendations? What should their lens be? Is it gonna do this? Is it gonna keep the town like that? Is it gonna make us more something? And then as it's done, we'll collect the cards and you can get refreshments. Yep. Question?
So I wanted to add something, a little something to your definition of master plan, because my understanding is a little bit different. In my mind, a master plan should be aspirational, especially since Waterville is an existing community that's been developed over a period of time. In my mind, the revision to the master plan should take into account the things that probably were missed, not done, could be improved upon. An example would be a bike pedestrian friendly.
Right, but that's not what we're gonna talk about tonight.
Let me
We're
finish
just
though.
gonna talk
Because
about
you're
what
revising the master plan.
kind of communities.
I understand, but are you going to have more than this meeting to talk about the master plan? What's the time frame?
Terry can talk about that at the end of the meeting when we wrap
That
up.
should be kind of the first part of it, to be quite honest with you.
Well, thanks for your opinion, but this is what we're doing right now. I'm sure that members of the planning board will be happy to chat with you after the meeting.
I've talked to the planning board before, and in my mind, this doesn't quite get to where it should. And
It's-
so
it's-
Let them follow the agenda.
It's not-
Let's just do it the way they want to. If you have comments, then
Wait.
now's the appropriate time for this comment related to the master plan. Let's define the master plan.
No, I didn't. So I'm just gonna hand around your existing master plan.
It's like you're at a bike path.
Just
This is the
hand
place
around
to put it.
existing plans, you have an idea of what it looks like.
That is the place to put it.
All right, but
Not at the end of the discussion.
no, it is important to know what the time frame is. Is this the one and only meeting, or is this information going to be determined? Okay.
So as people get done, can you help me collect? Can you?
Yeah, so we wanted to just have them pass it to the middle.
Well, they're gonna get done all different times. So, and they're gonna get up and go get it.
You want to collect them?
Exactly. I already feel old.
So as people have done, and I think a lot of them put them in a while so that the folks don't collect them. Oh, what was I on there?
I read this. Mountain biking, mountain recreation, better recreation.
It's got some really nice legs.
I would say you're 60%. Like, it's literally the worst.
I can't sit and read when I read. So I just like get a bit of read. Yeah, I know, that's
Now I feel like I'm left out. I'm like, this is the story ever. Story!
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Crowe, I'm the town manager. So tonight they put me in charge of food. Fortunately, we have Sean at the Coyote Grill, and we have barbecue chicken, mac and cheese, and rice up back. We have water and coffee over here. So please take a few minutes and get food if you would like, and mingle. And Tara will finish putting together the information we just handed in. All right? Right? So please feel free to start down at the hot right, your left.
So I missed the first half hour.
Not a whole lot. We just did an introduction and then people got index cards to write what you'd like most about the town of Waterville on, and then people are becoming. Was there a table outside?
Could have been. I signed in. I don't know.
Okay.
Why are we going to have another thing we need index cards for?
Nope.
Okay.
I wish I had my notebook.
Let's see what this looks like as the head of school. Publicly in the Bike pit, town square.
Oh, yep, thank you. High school soccer.
She
No, it's okay. I'll eat all the leftovers.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're ready to go, but they need the back. All right, so my first question, this is what we did with this class art. Does everyone see at least some of their thoughts in those categories? Does that, everybody agree to kind of work with these categories? You kind of got it?
The only thing I didn't see was environmentally friendly.
I think we were thinking of that in the natural beauty, mountains, climate, health. There were a lot of things to put in.
No, I understand, but that's pretty important.
Sorry, that's fine. That's fine. So I only have two rules for the discussion. One is be brief and the other is be polite. And that means wait and call on before you speak so that other people don't feel like they're here just to hear two people yelling at each other or conversing or having a private conversation. So what we need to do for each of these things, and we'll give each one maybe 8 to 10 minutes, I'll try to keep an eye on time. We will not leave any later than 8:30. Promise that. So,
Can I ask a question?
yep,
Are these in order because of?
No.
No order.
no order. This is a look orderly. No order. So, for each of these things, we're gonna spend 8, 9, 10 minutes talking about what do you want the planning board to know? What else should come under that as we're thinking about it? What is it about that that's important? Are there threats to it? Is it a strength that there's some way to build on? Some of you may be familiar with something called a SWOT analysis, where you talk about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I don't like to put people in, or their thoughts in those tiny boxes. I'll probably organize everything later that way, but there might be other things that you want to see that just don't fit in those categories, so I don't want to get stuck on those. But that's really what we're looking for. What do we need to know about the things? What is it that makes it great? What is that feature that, how do we hold on to that? So, starting with the school, what makes it great? What is it that makes it a great feature of the town? How do we hold on to that? Are there worries? Are there challenges? Yep.
I'm Wayne Roswell. I moved here 3 years ago, mostly because I went on a tour of the school for my little girls, and I loved it, so I came here. It allows the students to get out, do hiking, biking, enjoy the natural beauty of our area, the amenities. They can go ice skating, they can go skiing in the winter, and as far as I know, up until last year, it was ranked number 2 in the state of New Hampshire. So our academics are there.
Don't overthink it. So we're gonna give Nick a minute to just get in the swing of it. People should speak up if we didn't really capture your thought or we did it wrong. That's why we have it up here for you to look at on the live stream rather than scribbling in my writing on the chart.
I think everything Wayne said is absolutely true. My daughter went through K through 8 school here, Wendy Matthews. But a big challenge is getting families in town and encouraging them to stay, not just K through 8, but K through retirement for the parents, for the whole family.
Is it challenge to
Waterville, I'm actually the school board chair. I'll tell you, I moved here to the Valley because of the school. My kids went K through 8, K through 12 down to Plymouth, now at college. And the school demographics have changed over the decade and a half that I've been here. We used to have a school that was thriving with 35, 38, sometimes 40 kids. Over the last 3-4 years, we have a demographic now of 20 kids, 20 this year. We need to do something. The numbers are down. This is, I would say, and the school board's trying to address this. We're trying to come up with a preschool. So we configured the school to try to figure out how to have a preschool in school. We're trying to advertise, but this is a serious problem that we need to get the kids, we need to get the demographics and the numbers of the kids going to the school higher. I think one of the biggest issues with that is our housing is just so expensive that you can't keep young families here.
Let's stay with that thought a minute. So,
Can I comment on that for just a minute, please? I think you're right, and I think.
Can't hear you.
I think at the tail end of it, you touched on it, because in the beginning you talked about the symptom, but what you want is the root cause. To me, the root cause is you don't have enough density in the valley. And
A little louder, Suzanne.
you don't have enough density in the valley. And I think what I mean by that is you don't have enough people for your schools. Businesses, it's sort of cyclical type of thing. So businesses don't have enough people, restaurants don't have enough people, business owners don't have enough people. As a consumer, I don't have enough competition. You know, I don't have enough choices of places to go. So I think until you address the fact that there's not enough housing, people can't afford it, there's not enough people here, I don't see how you fix the problem.
so what I think would be helpful is we don't really have it somewhere else, and it's a really big challenge for all of the towns in New Hampshire, really. Besides more affordable housing and a preschool, that people have other ideas on things that might help attract younger families. Yep.
Looking at the tuitioning it, lowering it, looking at bringing that cost down. It's at 8,000 right now. That's too much.
Yep.
My name's Tori. I'm the new executive director at DBTS. So hi everyone. I took the job a year ago and I have 2 little kids, and I did not choose to buy a house in Waterville Valley because I have really little kids, and there's not only no preschool, but there's no childcare at all in the valley. So if I live here in town, I have to drive all the way to Campton or Meredith for daycare. That's totally prohibitive. So that's the other side of the coin.
You got it.
And having additional daycare. Oh, I'm Helen.
I'm not making people stand up, but I
Having
do are so they
additional
can hear it, so.
daycare, having additional daycare available would help small businesses.
Yep, right, yes.
Maybe possibly thinking about people working at home and how you can appeal to families that do have businesses that they can work out of their house, and would have children come. I don't know.
So being home, making sure your home business friendly.
Right.
Anything else? Yep.
David Britton, I think that the resort has changed tremendously in the last 40 years. In fact, it can't compete with other resort areas. And that its real unique function is that it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. It's an absolutely ideal place to live and bring up children. We have Plymouth State, we have the hospital, we have the expansion on Tenny Mountain Highway. These people would like a place to live where their kids could walk to school safely, where it's dog friendly, where all of the activities that have already been mentioned are there. For me, the future of Waterville is in long-term residents with their children. What we need is a preschool, we need daycare, and we need affordable housing.
Brian Walker, just to share part of the reason my family and I have a kindergartner, 2nd grade. We actually rented for 2 years before making the decision to buy here, and to kind of have that opportunity to just a second from the things that said, we really, I've grown to love being here in Waterville, really appreciate the small community, the walk-in, and the different opportunities. So I think anything we can do to help create those housing opportunities, so that, even if it's long-term rentals, because I think when families get a chance to be here and can make it work, they naturally fall in love with it and want to stay here longer.
Yes, Rich?
Hi, Rich Rita, both on the planning board and one of your glorious, maybe select board members. Let me just touch base quickly, it's a bit of a longer list, but on the issue of affordable housing. When we have zoning, for example, like you can have a single family home, but you have to have half an acre. That's going to increase the cost. And so when the planning board, for example, tries to change that type of requirement, like what we did put before the town this past fall.
I'm just not sure this is the place.
Well, but I mean, affordable housing, I think, is the key to this. And
Yeah.
so when we can't make those kind of changes,
Right.
so we can get
And so
smaller houses in
Yeah.
for more affordable people, more affordable to people, you can see the sort of dilemma we're in. We like to have our acre with a house on it, but at the same time, we want to make it affordable so we have young families in here. There's a disconnect between the two for the schools.
The previous master plan had more density in the master plan itself. Certain areas, it was decided whether it was for economic reasons or other reasons, went ahead and went with single-family homes. So there are some areas that haven't been built on yet, like the area between the parking area between the town and other places where a higher level of density townhomes or things like that could be built. I mean, one option is look at moving the ice arena, put that in the parking lot, make that a hotel or a condo. So there are ways to go about doing that, but it takes a little bit of work.
Yep, in the back.
I just wonder, Jen Fairchild, I wonder some of the young people that have kids, are you just seeing any cultural things, or like when I think about my daughter moving back here with her kids, there's nothing to do for them. And I'm just wondering if that's what you find, or does that matter to you, or I mean, as far as moving here.
All right, I'll let two people answer that, and then we should move on to categories.
Katie Smith, I have 2 kids in the school. Our kids actually have a ton of opportunities in this town, and in the greater community. Most of the sports are through the Plymouth programs. They get to meet a lot of the kids in that way, so that they're ready when they need them in high school. So they're not isolated just in their own school, but they get to meet all around the surrounding schools. School on the mountain and skiing at the resort in itself allows them to meet the schools there. They all have skiing programs.
But for you, as the adult?
Me as the adult and my child being home.
What do you have to do that, where 30 to 40-year-olds, or whatever the age, 21 to come into Waterville Valley, what is there for you to do that would attract you besides for what your kids are doing? Is there enough without all of these things?
Yeah.
We drink wine when kids go to bed.
All right, no more comments about alcohol, that's really disruptive.
The major attraction of the school that your daughter will see is that our kids walk or bike to school every day. They are safe. The community is watching them, and most towns now don't have that. They don't have that safe factor. So that would be a huge draw for living in town. And then
There's just no entertainment except for bars.
When you have little kids, you don't do entertainment.
Yeah.
Okay, real quick, and I want to move on. This is an important. You have one more specific thought.
My
It's an important topic.
My other thought about that is, I understand that, the planning of the town might have had whatever class with the vote last year, but the big deal, guys, is to get families in town, they have to rent first. Nobody moves to a town and buys.
Right.
None of you have moved straight to a town and probably bought a house. And the issue is there are no long-term rentals. I work on it every day with employees of the mountain trying to get them here, families in the school, trying to find long-term rentals. And there were 3 families that came to rent one place, and one family got it. and those other two went with it.
All right, let's try to.
I don't think we're ready to move off this subject. So Katie, thank you. We're on the chapel board together. I'm on the historical society, board, and the planning board for this map. But, there is.
Something quick on
this-
schools or young families. Other than that, we're gonna move on to the next category.
No, I'm stating what I want to state right now. We work. So, it's not to say this is how it's been. This is how this is, community is going to move forward. The chapel is something, that can bring spirituality into it. The school is critically important to this community. You're not a community if you don't have, race center, you can throw that in, but, in terms of having some level of spirituality or understanding of that, and education, okay? This school is critically important to us remaining a community, okay? And so it's not, anything else, but it's like, yeah, I mean, we need to maybe think about things a little differently from time to time in terms of what we're doing. I'm sorry to interrupt your,
No, that was all right,
agenda.
and there was another, you next, there was another one in the back first, too.
Melissa Walker, and you had asked a question about the cultural piece. What do you do for the cultural piece? I like being here. I love the outdoors, and so I'm often out when I work from home. So when I'm not working, I'm outside playing. But if I want that cultural piece that you're talking about, I go and do it. Or I find a way to make it happen, and it's an effort. And I think it's fair to let people know that, no, there's not a movie theater down the street, but there might be an art opening in Clement, or there might be a lecture at the Silver Center. I think just finding out about those things and sort of, if there were easier way to find out about those things, that might make things more appealing. But when I want culture like that, in that sense of the word, I go and I find it.
Or even if the town or if someone is able to organize that, or to be able to just say, here's what's happening.
Okay, over here, and then I'm writing this topic down to go back to if we have more time at the end, but you guys have been reading while, one last thought.
Thank you, Daryl.
Daryl Fernandez. I would just say on the topic of community and culture, we do have work to do as a community to make sure we have everything. This is one of the largest gatherings of this community that we've had probably all year. Right? So we do have work to do, and I think one of the visions here is that we think about community across the spectrum, and that we have to highlight it because that's what it's going to take to bring multi-generational people into the valley, because that's what the healthy community is, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of opportunity to take advantage of what's already here globally, whether it's in the valley or not. But I think you're right that from an outside-in point of view, you have to go dig at it. It's not apparent, and we need to do a better job as we go forward.
So, for the next category, public land access, I understand that most of that is gonna fall in the category of trails, but there are enough people that just talked about the White Mountain National Forest as a theme that I wanted to make sure and have that as a separate category. Is there something about, anything anybody wants to say about that isn't about trails? Yep.
I just want to say, the beauty of Waterville is you're surrounded by the White Mountain National Forest. So then how do you make that an asset to the community? And one way people have been trying to do it, I think, is the rec center has, making a hiking center. There's a ton of trails that you have immediate access from Waterville Valley. Mountain biking, you already have a great cross-country trail network. It wouldn't take that much, working with the various entities to make it a mecca for beginners, intermediate type mountain biking. It gets more people here, they see the valley, etc. So how do you, I guess my point is, how do you leverage the public land access to the town's benefit? It's kind of an open question.
Yeah. I think, if I was writing the town plan or a lot of elements, I would do that. But don't want to take up the time now on the how we get there. I want to make sure we leave with the where I'm going.
Well, I think that the goal, I think the goal should be, how do you make the beauty of the public assets access, sorry.
So
And the
put that
White
as a
Mountain
thought,
National
yeah.
Forest, beneficial to the town.
Yeah, so we'll hold that thought. Yeah,
The community beds are wonderful, but one thing that strikes me about this community, while we have beautiful trails, we have very few opportunities to grow our own foods. And so, you know, I'm a teacher here, we love to be in the beds, it's great for us to learn that way, but it's also wonderful, you know, communities like Concord have huge plots where a family could actually grow enough of their own food for a good portion of the year. So that would be something to put into the mix, I would think.
so community garden.
David Britton. My interest is in improving the quality of life for the property owners who exist. Personally, I don't care anything about the welcome sign that costs $200,000. I wish the town would buy the 13.5 acres that border the main branch of the river. The old dump land goes from the West Branch Bridge south. Develop that for dry fly fishing, dog park, community gardens, sculpture walk, etc. That's a wonderful, wonderful piece of land. And the idea that it just sits there is amazing to me. I like the businesses in town to flourish, but I believe we've been putting a disproportionate amount of effort into propping up businesses that may simply not make it. Develop the territory to improve the quality of life of the property owners. That includes those who don't have a vote.
Is there anything anybody wants to add that, I mean, I was thinking public lands as well on National Forest, but clearly there are other thoughts there. Is there anything else to add before we move into trails? Because I know there's a lot we want to say about trails. Yep.
Bob Freeze. You know, for years, way back when Tom first came, Tom Portland, there was a plan to actually pave Triple I Road. And it's not Triple E, it's Triple I. And, you know, at the other end, the Forest Service is paved in as far as going up to Russell Pond. It would be great, I think, to encourage the Forest Service to year by year whack off a little piece of that so we can have a route that goes around. I think it's a safety issue. When Hurricane Irene came, the road going out of the valley was closed for a period of time. And having a second route that people can use. I mean, it's on the map. You see people go in there with New York plates.
So make it a year-round road.
Yeah, it'd be nice to make that a year-round road, and I think having that part of the master plan as a community, I think that's what
I know there've been I know when I ran the planning at North Country Council, there were a lot of conversations with the town and DOT about that. Let's move on to trails. I know that that's a focus for a lot of people. What are the features that are great about the trail system here? What are the threats? What are the things that could be built on to make it more of a strength? No, kind of a lot on this one.
Robert Dean, I live over Sunnyside. The trails here are incredibly diverse, like that note says. There's hiking trails, Nordic skiing trails, running, biking trails. The network is one of the densest networks of trails you can find anywhere. We have an amazingly well mapped out system, which from a public safety perspective is actually a great asset because we don't have to search for people as often as we used to. But knowing that that diversity also does bring levels of difficulty. Maybe there are some trails that we should, warn people this is an aggressive trail. It's not something you should try to tackle if you're not up for it. The rec department has been doing a tremendous job with the Red Liner program to bring more awareness to the fact that Waterville Valley has 125 miles of trails in the compact area, the 400 miles that we call our square. And we are doing what we can, I think, from a community level to benefit that. The WVAIA, also, improving the trails and working on those. If you have never heard of it, you should look into it. It's fun to go and grab a tool and go out and bust a sweat in the woods and build some water bars and preserve some of nature. But yeah, I think the trails is one of those things that if we could somehow hand people a pamphlet to say, oh yeah, you can walk out your door and in 5 minutes be totally engrossed in nature and have nothing but the sound of the birds and the wind of the trees, it would bring more people to the valley, I feel. That's one of those things I think we're losing in communities these days. Thank you.
Yep, in the back.
Yeah, hi, Ryan Turncliffe. So just as an aside, visited Kingdom Trails. It's a huge mountain biking place in northern Vermont. Their trail network kicks our butt. It's a mecca. I mean, someone mentioned the word mecca. It is a mecca for mountain biking. We could do that easily
Like
enough
Kingdom
here.
Trails.
One of the cool things they have up there, they're outposts. I think someone also said they're outposts. There's like a food truck in the middle of nowhere all summer long. And they bring food. So it's just a cool thing. It gets people out in the woods, on the trails. So I just throw it out there.
Brittany Britton, I don't know if anybody would think of it, it's just sort of an idea about dog sledding and then horses, horseback riding. I know some people are interested in horses. Yeah.
Asian summer, this will be really quick. I love Nordic skiing, and especially when the snow is all clean and white. I have a dog. I keep it after my dog. If your dog poops on the snow on the Nordic trails, please pick it up.
I tell it, everybody uses mine, yep. Yeah.
Maintenance and development with the trail systems with the national, Tim Smith, maintenance and development of the trail systems and communication with the national forest is definitely a challenge. It needs to be listed.
I'll just jump in. So I moved from Kingdom Trails. I lived there before I lived here. I can tell you that it has dramatically changed the demographic of the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont in all the ways that we were talking about. We were talking about bringing young families to the area. When I first started mountain biking, I'm a rather serious mountain biker, I guess. When I first started mountain biking, we were all dirtbags. That was back in my younger days. Mountain biking is a sport with a lot of disposable income now, and the more that you can harness those mountain bikers, they're professionals, they spend a lot of money on their equipment, they go a lot of places and want to be in beautiful environments. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's something there for sure.
Yeah.
The fact that you said the word demographic, I don't know where to add this in, but what is the demographic we're looking for? Are we trying to get more young people in? Because there's also the idea of getting people to, what's the phrase I always use about staying in place? Aging in place. Aging in place, where you decide what valleys where you want to live until you die. Are there vans to go to the grocery store? Are there, what services do you offer seniors to come? Or do we not want to encourage that? Or do we want to encourage all of it?
Yeah.
It's a big question.
This, I'll write it here.
Could you just add mountain biking to the title of the trails? Because right now you can mountain bike and bike on trails. So just add that.
Yeah.
To,
Just put it in the bunch.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, are we doing it there, or are we doing it in the biking section?
No, we're doing
No,
it
that's
there.
a different issue.
We're doing it there. The other
Oh, whoa,
way
whoa,
is biking on
how is it a
roads.
different issue? You've got biking and pedestrian as the next thing.
Mountain biking
Everybody
versus
here.
road biking.
This is
Okay,
trails, so the
Okay.
other, hold on, the other one is bike ped friendly as in the roads. are-
Well, you've got bike and pedestrian, but biking and pedestrian is not necessarily the
Well,
same
I'm explaining
thing.
that now.
Okay, I'll let you go.
So
It's not.
trails, anything else on trails? Yep.
Greg Kennan, I would just suggest that whatever development happens, not jeopardize access to the trails. Don't cut off, don't build something such that you can't get to a trail. Don't build something on the only parking lot at the head of the trail so that it's no longer used.
Sorry, just one last comment. It applies to the bike and pet friendly too. Anyone that's living in big cities, there's an explosion of electric bikes, electric scooters, electric everything. So it's something the town is probably going to need to be thinking about, both in town as well as in the trail system.
Getting ready for e-bikes. Get ready for e-bikes.
Should I put that under friendly?
No, just put it where we are. There's mountain bikes. All right, let's go on to the next bike head issue, which is talking more about the road, getting around the transportation system to get bike head friendly. Yeah.
So the bike-friendly aspect is, major cities are doing this also. They're creating multi-use paths, multi-use sidewalks, because right now there's not adequate sidewalks in Waterville. They're too narrow, two people can't walk side by side. If you have children, one time they had basically a bike system with an X to it, which to me said, I don't like kids, I don't like bikes. So in my mind, you need to make it so children can get around, people that don't ride very much feel safe. So by doing a multi-use path, a 10-foot wide, basically a 10-foot wide sidewalk next to the road, you can alleviate some of the drainage issues and everything else. You don't need it on both sides, but the major roads in Waterville should have a 10-foot wide sidewalk, at least one side of the road on the major roads, and eventually all the roads.
Mike, just related to that, like my wife and I would walk to town square, would walk all over the place in the daytime. But what he's saying would be, if we're going to town square to hear music at night, we drive. Because we don't want to walk back in the dark, don't feel safe.
So you want to see it.
And for instance, the crosswalk at the health club, going there, people blow through that all the time.
So were you saying lights on the sidewalk like he says, or?
Just, well, lights on a sidewalk or a dedicated sidewalk where we feel that we can walk and not worry about, for instance, if there's fireworks or there's something going on in town, we're walking home, there's cars coming by us. And we come to crosswalk, we cross at the health club. And then a lot of times when I'm getting here and I'm ready to cross through there, people just ignore that crosswalk and blow right through it. So I don't do that at night. I walk in the daytime. I take my car to town square. I take my car just to station.
So was it important that it be lit, or if it's away from the road, does it need to be lit? I think we weren't clear on that.
Well, it needs to be made safe.
Yeah, so some areas would need to be lit. Okay, in the back here.
In addition to, Kristen Buchanan, in addition to maybe lighted signs or crosswalk lights, to piggyback on the friendly reminder that you should clean up when your dog poops, the speed limit is 25. And there are very large trucks barreling down the road. There are cars barreling down the road. And I'll be honest, like, it is safe, but our kid doesn't want to ride his bike to school because he has to cross 49. And there's not a crosswalk, so maybe we could get flashing signs on the speed.
All right, one last thought here.
I think another thing, since we share all the trails, whether they be biking or hiking or walking, we've got bikers, hikers, and walkers all on the same trails. Maybe if people on bikes had a bell or something, that when you're coming up on you, you ring the bell and say, on your right, whatever.
Right.
This would make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's why sidewalks aren't usually shared except for under a certain.
But even hiking in the woods.
But they're not using 10 feet. How many trails here are used by mountain bikers and hikers? Is that getting? Really?
We don't have any specific, there's no separation at all.
No, I just put that in here.
What do you want me to put?
Trails are shared with hikers and up and down the stairs.
There's nothing saying that you couldn't.
All right, let's go to.
So, I'm sorry, I want to add one more thing about bike path. A lot of cities and towns are doing what they call traffic calming, and Waterville looked at that at one time. But there are things you can do, traffic calming, to slow cars down, that aren't speed bumps, but they kind of act kind of like, they have a gentle ramp go up, and so the pedestrian doesn't step off a curb. They have a continuous flow sidewalk to sidewalk. So there are things you can do to help, you know, in the connectivity.
Like a speed table as,
Yes.
as a platform.
Yeah, they're like a 10-foot access, they're 10-foot wide and 10-foot down. And you can also plow them, doesn't negatively affect the snow removal and things like that. And that would be great to have, you know, near the school, near the town center. There's a number of places where I think would be very helpful.
Would shared lanes in town square itself make sense, where you have what we call a sharrow, that means it's arrows and a bike in where you're driving that tells you that bikes use the lane too? Would that make sense in town square?
That doesn't really help like the novice, the child, or a low intermediate rider. They don't
Not really an instead,
they don't feel as comfortable.
The bikers that come on
So there were a lot of things that kind of I think fell in this category of snow sport culture, like the institute, that was called.
Yes.
The academy, that's what I'm trying to say.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I was talking, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so there were just a lot of categories that I thought fell in that snow sport culture. Including the major ski area and the academy.
Before we go right there, can we go back to 1 second back to talking about the road bikers and not? I think you've got two very distinct classes of people that ride bicycles on the road in the valley. You've got people that are road cyclists that know how to ride bicycles on the road and do what they do. And you've got folks that are Frank, okay, tell us, Frank. You've got folks that rent and just ride around and don't necessarily know a lot of bike etiquette. And how you merge those two is a very important thing, right? So to the earlier point about merging bike lanes in town, I think it's valuable because you've had, someone mentioned earlier, the concept of multi-use paths. That doesn't work, especially on road. You don't have pedestrians and cyclists on the same path. Even New York, Boston, anywhere else, you've got cycling paths and pedestrian paths. I teach my kids, you don't ride on the sidewalk.
Right.
Sidewalk is for walking. Right? Road is for cycling. So I'm trying to, as you delineate those two, you've got two different classes to think about, which is separate than the mountain bike thing. Right? So, sorry, good.
My son lives in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. They have miles of trails that are about 10 feet wide that are all over town that are shared by pedestrians and bicyclers. Everybody has a bell, and I would not want my kid to be riding on a street in Waterville Valley. Or if I was a tourist, I would just.
But they're 10 feet wide. We don't have 10 feet wide trails.
Let's not go down in those fields.
But that's a different thing.
That's what I'm saying.
One of the interesting things about bicycling out here is when you look at the bike data for the North Country, like everything from Plymouth to the Canadian border, the most heavily biked route is from Plymouth to Waterville Valley. So
yeah, 49 is awesome.
Yeah, right.
Really, it's awesome.
Yeah,
Wide
but
shoulders.
it's dominated. I want to go on to the snow sport culture, which is about the ski area. It's about the academy. What do people want to say about the snow sports culture that includes the ski area, the academy, what else?
Okay, I'll say something. So there are a lot of people that come up to ski that have never been into Waterville Valley.
Yeah.
So figuring out ways to divert traffic, not necessarily car traffic, to get people into town square from the mountain would be economically helpful. It would get more people in the housing, so it would be helpful for real estate sales. If there's a way to do it.
That's my understanding of
aside from rerouting the roads, but I think that's important.
I've lived up here my entire adult life, and when I meet people and tell them I live in Waterville Valley, they say, people live there? That's the reality of it. Our identity as a town is tied to the resort. The resort is so much more than, just Waterville Valley Resort. We say Waterville Valley as the town. How do we create our own identity? How is Waterville Valley as a town recognized separately from the blue-green WV?
I grew up in New Hampton, New Hampshire. I actually have 2 points. The first, thank you, Rob, for bringing that up because it's actually a big thing on my mind. People in New Hampshire do not want to come to Waterville Valley. And I think that's a large point. Until I came here and saw the school and saw the community, I did not want to come to Waterville Valley. I did not want to ski at Waterville Valley.
Why?
Because it just wasn't the place where anybody in my social circle wanted to be. It doesn't.
That's a big blanket to throw.
I'm just.
For my son, it would be a 15-mile drive from 93 to here.
And that's what it was when I was in college at Plymouth State
So let's
University.
try to focus on what can you imagine would change that?
What changed that was my exposure to the community. I moved to Thornton because we liked the area. Then I came to the school. I saw the school because I was looking for elementary schools. Waterville Valley was highly rated, and I loved the school. So we came in, we checked out the community, we loved it, we moved in. We actually did that within a week of doing the school, by the way. We moved into the valley within a week of moving to the school. As far as the snow sport culture, because I'd like to get to my other point, I have the fortunate, I had the good fortune of growing up on an ice rink. I was a nationally competitive ice dancer for 5 years in my teens. And I actually learned to skate here because that was the closest ice rink, with the exception of seasonal ice rinks in Holderness and New Hampton. I learned to skate on Waterville Valley because it was year-round. I think that the snow sport culture extends beyond the mountain and the cross-country trails. I think the snow sport culture extends to other snow sports, and I think there is more to be had here in the town.
I think that what has been in the master plan in the past that I think would make an enormous difference is having a connection from the town to the ski area. And the master plan back in the day called for a gondola. And I know that that's being explored. I think that is a key element. I think it make Waterville Valley extremely unique. It would stand out as a resort, having a gondola from that you don't have to. The other thing that I hear a lot at the resort that I don't know if we advertise much, you can park your car when you arrive and you don't have to touch it till you go back home on a weekend. Because we do have a fantastic trolley system and everything's right there. But a gondola where you can come into town square, you come for lunch and all that, I think is a key element.
Park in one place. There's a lot of people in the trolley. Yeah.
So this hopefully will be the last time they have to hear from me tonight. This is clearly my bailiwick. This is what I spend a lot of time thinking about is the snow sports culture. That's obviously what brought me to the valley. BDTS brings 250 families to Waterville Valley every weekend who already have ties here. Do you want to talk about the low-hanging fruit in terms of converting young families to the area? Like, those are the people. They already have places here. They already have residences here. So I think that really needs to be part of this conversation is how do we get them to stay. We've got a couple families here that have shown up, which I'm grateful for. But I spend a lot of time thinking about that because from an athletic perspective, purely athletic, the more time that kids spend on snow, the more time that they spend thinking about being on snow, the greater their athletic trajectory, right? So the greater that their exposure to this kind of community is, the better that they're going to be. That's just the calculation there. I also think that the way that the community embraces snow sports is really important. I think it's kind of ingrained. That's why this area became a community, right? I grew up ski racing in New Hampshire also, and I, confession, never came into town. I'd go up there, I'd take my runs, and then I'd leave. So I'm not unique, unfortunately, for all of us sitting in this room, unfortunately. But I do think that's a really important group of constituents that we can get to be residents through the complement of things that we offer and how we can embrace them and their families. So thank you for that. The other thing that I was going to say, and I don't want to step on Tim here, but I think when you talk about a threat, is you have to think about the Epic Pass and the Icon Passes. I think that's a huge, it's a game changer in our industry. And Tim and I talk about it a lot. One of the things that I think, the Epic Pass and the Icon Pass are big conglomerate ski passes. You can ski at 150 different ski areas with one pass. That's a threat to small privately held ski areas, not small, but privately held ski areas. It's a huge threat. When you think about what's going to make people come to Waterville instead of living in Boston and buying their Icon Pass or their Epic Pass and going to 8 different ski areas over the course of the winter, it's the sense of community. If you have a sticky community where people feel like they belong, they will come to your community rather than winging around to Breckenridge or Vail or Sunapee or wherever else. That's really the most important part. And we have the seeds of that, but that needs to be a focus about how you get people coming back.
Let's jump ahead one and we'll go
Can I
back.
make one comment just
Quickly.
before you just said, and David alluded to it before. You've got a huge number of property owners in town who I think feel disconnected from the town because they have no representation. And you have to change that legally in order to give them a vote and things that go on. But I do get the sense that a number of people that own properties in town don't feel like they're part of the
Yeah,
community.
so let's start going down to the end of the list so that we can make that segue while we're thinking about sense of community. Let's skip down to the small town, see feelings from the community, and talk about that more. How do we connect those things? What are some ways you would do that without being able to let people vote? Because that would be against the Constitution of the state.
Right, exactly. But maybe reaching out, giving them a vehicle to have their voice heard, like around. This would be a good one, but how many people are there from DBTS? There are a couple of families here, and they may not even know about it. So it's a chicken and egg. You gotta draw out their interest, but also let them know, particularly around the time of town meetings, that yes, they can't come and vote, but they can somehow have their voice heard either informally through some methodology, and that whatever it is, that can be presented at town meeting. Yes, they don't have the vote, but the families who are here part-time want their voice heard, and this is what they want. So,
moving in the back is not sitting in anything.
Well, I'm one of these DBTS families who came here year after year, and when we retired, we came back here. It's a lovely community, but a lot of my friends never came here, because this is a real skier's mountain, and what they want are restaurants, shops, et cetera, et cetera. This is not the kind of community that is. So I think this is a very special community that attracts a special brand of skiers. And I think we can't change that.
Yeah, so I'm one of those people as a property owner that feels disconnected. And I'll say 2 things. One, it's really hard to be connected. I don't care where you live. I mean, it takes time to be involved in your community. So if you want to be involved in a second community, like driving up here to be a part of this meeting tonight, it's really an effort. So making comments to planning board meetings or showing up at town meetings, I don't get a vote. So I would love to be heard, which is part of the reason I came tonight, so thank you. But it is hard. It is very hard to feel like part of the community. I feel like part of the community when I'm here. I love my neighbors. I'm not always here. I just want to be here more. Anyway, I just wanted to reiterate that comment. It is a challenge.
So to Bill's point, I'd like to see a raise. How many people here are non-voting members that can't vote? Can we get a show of hands? How many people showed up for it? That's a good. It's pretty good for some time. Yeah, but it's not a lot.
Okay, one conversation, please.
Sorry, I work in Washington, D.C. right now. I will be changing my office location to Boston, but it seems, on this note of giving people a voice, especially property owners, it seems ridiculous if we're having daytime planning board meetings and other types of meetings during the day. 4 o'clock for the school board is hard for me, but, you know, when I was working in Manchester, I could get here. But maybe if it's difficult to change the times of the meetings, maybe putting the meetings online.
Like,
yeah, but can you actively engage online? Maybe
Wait, my hand's on
maybe a Zoom meeting where you can chat and ask questions or engage online.
It definitely seems within reason. I think so many people have shared this issue because it is really, for any of us that work, we can't go to any of the meetings. And so it's for those that don't work. Can we talk a little bit about, a lot of people put one of the things they like was a small town feel, it's safe, it's family friendly, it's sense of community. Are there threats to that? And are there ways to strengthen it? We've kind of skipped around it. Yeah.
Sorry to jump in again, but I don't know if anybody knows this, but there are a whole bunch of social media sites online for rating schools and rating communities. Our town actually on one of those websites has 418 listed violent sexual assaults. I don't know why, because as far as I know, the police records state that there's 0. But that's what's online.
So inaccurate information on social media. Right. What else people want to say before we leave this category and go back to where we were? Yep.
We own here but don't live here, but on the issue of attracting people who would live here permanently and move here, what opportunities are there for people who might be able to work here or work remotely to be able to do so as a practical matter? And you can set up your laptop on a desk at home, I suppose, if you have space in your house to do that, but is there, for those who might not have the space for that or anything else, is there a way to do that? And people, as a practical matter, work here such that they be wanting to move.
So we're gonna put that as a point, but we're not gonna go down that path. Yeah. Excuse me. Please speak.
Broadband access, if you get full capacity, broadband access, if you're gonna actually encourage people to work from home or work remote here, will become a problem.
You'll need high-speed gigabyte access.
And that relates to this one.
And because we're on a satellite, you just can't get.
We're on fiber. We're on fiber.
I don't want people to just go down that path. Let's go back up to where we were in the next category before we skip around.
Wait, can I jump one more point with the last two?
Well, we're getting over our time. We're gonna end on time.
Okay, to Daryl's point, the other point about bringing people in here to work in town, that's a massive point. There's no place to work in town unless you have your own little place in your apartment. If we have a place in town square that's a WeWork or something else, you can have people to come in and work. You'll bring people in that can work remotely and still live in the valley and bring their kids in here and still work in DC and Boston and everywhere else.
So I want to talk about town square. People talk about that as a plus, the amenities, the activities there, that it's walkable. Can we just have one conversation, because that's not fair to everybody else that's in front of here. So what do you want to say about that? What could make it even better? It's definitely, everybody agrees it's a strength. What could make it even better? Yep.
The stores and restaurants need to be open. They have very limited hours, and they close down.
Okay,
And
so limited hours of the.
So when potential people come and they go into town square and the stores and restaurants are closed, it makes it look like a dead town.
Just tough to hear.
Oh,
Yeah, well,
I said
that's one reason that we type 2, so this is, can read it. What else could make it more of an asset? Yes.
Alyssa Walker. And it's related to the last point, that a co-working space for remote workers who live here, as I do, and for folks who want to come up and maybe get some work done, not just an internet cafe, but an actual co-working space.
Yeah.
And I do believe, and I don't want to speak for her because she's not here, but there was talk of starting that possibly. Yeah.
Talk of starting what?
A co-working.
A WeWork space.
What else would make it more of an asset for the town? Yes.
Well, first of all, having a little grocery store that actually has food in it.
Drug down.
You go and you
A
want
market.
the lemon, there's no lemons, there's one lemon, and it's chocolate. So, I think that would make a difference, having a little market that has decent food. But they're changing that. I know, they're changing that, but it's not changing. It will.
What else will we leave this category? I want to catch up here. All right, let's go on to how do we make it more of a four-season recreation? That's an asset, how do we move on that? Do you have one more thing on Town Square? Or
Yeah, I was on the
you're-
next.
All right, good.
I was saying, we've
It
already
looks
mentioned,
like we've got ahead of you.
you were mentioning, you've already mentioned a couple of things you can do. Some is the public access, utilizing, taking advantage of the Forest Service, bringing mountain biking in, make it, utilize the trails better, things like that. That type of thing.
Do you guys remember, I think it was last summer, was it Eastern Mountain Sports or something? REI had a huge thing. People were coming here in droves, like they'd never seen
They
this
stopped,
beautiful
REI
place.
stopped having them.
I understand that,
Well,
that
my
concept.
point is, people paid thousands of
What was
dollars. People paid thousands of dollars to come in the valley. So what are we doing wrong that we can't advertise the way they did? And get
So
people
events,
to realize
maybe
all the
Yes.
stuff
more
that's
events.
Right. You used to have cyclocross racing here. There was multi-trail racing here, things like that. All of those things bring people in. They see the opportunity to see the town, and also utilize or go to the restaurants and the businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
So this was observation, Packard Field is an underutilized resource.
You say, speak louder.
Packard Field is an underutilized resource. It sits, it gets mowed, sometimes there's a couple people on it, but I think we need to figure out what to do with Packard Field.
You thinking like soccer tournament kind of?
I'm not even going to the one, I'm just saying we have a resource that we're sitting on.
Yep,
Jamie
Four
Gillen,
Seasons,
I'm
yep.
a part-time resident, and I see the thing talking about like the REI, whatever happened. I do agree that like these big tentpole activities can bring a lot of people in for a short period of time. Like I was at the Highland Games today, for example. A month ago, I was at the North American Obstacle Course Racing Championships in Stratton, Vermont, and the town was taken, their town was taken over by kilts today. That other town was taken over by spandex a month ago. And those things are good, but at the same time, part of the reason my wife and I live here is because we do four-season recreation. And when we go to Lincoln for these tentpole events, we're like, oh, this would kind of suck if this much traffic came to our town every 3 weeks. I think, having some of that, but there's got to be a balance because the fact that we're not dodging traffic is why we bought here, not in Lincoln. We live in southern New Hampshire, and we come up more weekends than not lately. And so that's kind of the thing for the balance of those big events. I will say, either things like that, if you don't have too many of them, I think it's a good thing. Whether it's, like I said, racing or Highland Games concerts, whatever. But yeah, I would hate to see this turn into Lincoln all the time with the traffic.
All right. Rich?
Yeah, I'd like to just raise a challenge, weather.
So what are our priorities in terms of winter, summer, spring, fall? But I see weather as a major challenge if we're looking to plan for season recreation.
Tim?
I think spring, mud season, it's because right now we have a good 3-season basis, but the 4th season is a challenge.
Yeah.
Why don't we add some motor races or something like that?
Nobody wants to be here.
It's not difficult to sit there and say that we have 4-season activities here in the valley. It's not difficult to say that. What's difficult to say is that we are drawing people here. It's not an issue of, whether we can get people to come, because we can, if we're willing to put in the work. In the spring, it's baseball, it's soccer. In the fall, it's football, it's other sports. But right now we do have the capability to go 4-season. It's just getting people here. If we can get more transplant families to come in and be residents here in the valley and spend more time here during the seasons when the town is bare.
So you're not drawing people other than. So are you only drawing people in the winter?
Summer and winter.
Summer and winter?
A little bit of both, but not.
So mostly summer and winter and a little bit of fall. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it, black flies. I did some research on the wigwags recently, and I was looking at old editions from 1969 and 1970, I was reading through them, and we used to treat them. They used to advertise, the black fly treatment is happening this week. Why are we doing it now? I don't know if that's
I just wanted to add, I think a big thing is once you're working from home, there's a job issue up here. It's not an easy place to make an income that you can go to BBTS or go to the program and everything. We are a BBTS family weekend, and my kids went through the program, they loved it. We lived in Boston. We recently sold our house in Boston, moved up here, but we couldn't have done that. We had a place for 21 years, condo, which was great, but we couldn't have done that till we retired.
Which goes back to.
There's no way.
I will say that is something, if this is a 10-year master plan, that changes fast every year. We're getting closer to everybody, like more and more jobs are able to be remote work. So that is something that we can see as an opportunity, I think, but is an issue for sure.
Staffing should be listed.
Yeah.
I got an email today that I think it was from the rec department talking about the job opportunity for leaf painting. Did you see that?
Yeah.
It was genius, pure genius. They were offering job opportunities for people who wanted to paint leaves at nighttime.
I just want to make sure staffing
We
is
would have
listed.
our big foliage in the morning when people woke up.
Well, that goes with the job opportunity.
Yeah, you can pick
If you have year-round, if you have 4-season activities, then you have the ability to employ people year-round, correct?
But the hard part is just the employment. It's getting the right type of employment that can come in this far from the areas that they can live in. So the challenge with staffing is being able to not only have them live here, but also have them commute here, have the right staffing levels, and all of these different types of facilities that we all want as a community.
All right, two more.
I just want to say, I think as a town, continuing to support everything that the rec department is doing, I'm amazed at your energy that Brooke has brought to Red Liner Patch and the wanting to improve the trail system around town center and everything. I think as a 10-year plan, just keep that going. People will hear about it and keep coming.
We'll just leave it on
Can I add to Tim's point on staffing?
Quickly.
You said two, sorry.
Well, there's one more
I'm
back.
sorry.
Okay.
Will we get to vote about the black flag thing, because I think it's, or you just say, or treat yourself. You just put stuff on
All right, that was quick enough, go ahead.
I'll put on the board member of a condo association in town. To staffing, it's really hard to find labor that is willing to work on condo associations generally. There's like 3 or 4 folks and the pricing gets out of whack sometimes. There's not enough supply to deal with the demand of work that needs to get done at all of the condo associations after the stone debacle from a few years ago.
All right, let's,
Contractors, generally.
That's what it should be listed as contract.
Contract work.
Contractors,
Jordan.
temporary workers.
All right, I put a lot of things together in this next category because they were kind of all over the place, but kind of related with natural beauty, mountains, quiet, healthy environment. Maybe it goes with environmentally friendly too, but what are the features we want to make sure to protect? What are the threats? How do we build on it?
Suzanne Ennis again. I did talk about how impressed I was that REI brought that in, but I also, part of the reason that we've been coming here all these years and we ended up buying a house here after we retired is we looked at a lot of communities. We never wanted to live in a place that had a road through it. If you're coming to Waterville Valley, you want to be here. You have to work to get here. And so I think it is, people talked about it before, but I think it is a delicate balancing act between keeping the valley vibrant, but not making it the type of thing where we're getting in traffic jams.
I'm Morgan. I grew up in Campton. A lot of you may not know me, but you know my mom and the post office. I will send your regards. Having grown up there, and my mom has worked there longer than I've been alive, I spent a lot of time in the valley. I live here and not there because of the natural beauty, and I work an hour away. My husband works an hour and a half away. We choose to live here. So how do we get more people like young professionals like us, a nurse, a paramedic, a firefighter, to live here and contribute to Waterville?
So maybe put hard to use as a asset. Attract. Yeah. Anything else in there? Let's kind of wrap environmentally friendly with it, I think. Yeah.
I think maybe listing just in the whole vision plan, I always loved the idea of it being an island surrounded by mountains or end of the road, you know. We're trying to get to a vision here, so I think that needs to be incorporated.
And that's that last category that we're gonna get to. Quite a few people wrote, that one of the things they love is that feeling of, it's the end of the road, it's accessible, but isolated. It was isolated, not isolated. So there's, how do we keep that as a strength without losing all the small town feel and natural beauty? Who hasn't, you haven't?
I'm Patty Fergal, Mike's wife. I don't know if anyone's here. Just, no one mentioned the starry sky, the dark sky. And
Yes,
that's
I
always-
have, yeah.
Oh, you did?
Put that
Okay.
in environmental
I don't see
friendly,
it
natural
there,
beauty.
but-
It was in the cards that in my mind, it was in natural beauty.
Okay.
So we put dark skies,
I think we take it for
we'll
granted.
put
but-
dark skies in there, yeah.
I definitely want to put natural beauty or environment friendly with water is key. It's the only place in the US I'll drink the water from the tap. And everybody does. People take gallons home.
Oh, yeah.
But it smells of bleach. It's awful.
Yeah.
All right, let's, that's why we're all here. Sorry.
It's part of the whole theme about natural beauty and how, how do we incorporate that? There's so much in the literature now about forest bathing and health and wellness. How do we incorporate those messages in all of our marketing materials out to people to get them to come here? Because there's so much every day in the news about the benefits for being outdoors, being in the forest. So let's use that to our advantage because we have an abundance of that.
Yep. Yeah.
place in general. I feel like there are lots of groups is a loose word, contingencies doing great things in this valley, and I would love to see a collaborative, comprehensive communications plan so that we can figure out what we want to tell people and get it out there in efficiently and effectively, so the message does what we want it to do.
At the end of Market Natural PV.
David Britton, this is under environmentally friendly. People talk a lot about their property values and about the tax rate. I think it's just talk. I pride myself on being one of the poorest people in the Waterville Valley, and I don't care about the tax rate. I believe it's lower than that of Camden and Thornton. It's a non-issue for me. What is an issue, and I think will be in the future a far bigger issue for human beings, is that they can be proud of the town they live in, which means environmentally friendly issues, solar power, ski lifts that run on biofuel, devices to keep people from driving their SUV to the post office every day, a whole series of things. Maybe moving into prohibition of one-use plastic, but a whole panoply of environmentally friendly issues that current and future generations are going to brag about. I live in a town that does that.
So it can be a
Let's find a
B or
way,
A.
let's find a way to recycle, because it makes me sick not to be able to recycle to live here. We wait for our son to come up and visit us, we give him bags. It's a shame.
I wanted to add to the environmentally friendly, I think, okay, go ahead.
So I'd like to piggyback on your idea and put something bold out there, but I think it's if anybody was paying attention to Friday in the news, I think everyone in this room understands where we need to go. I'd like to propose that we go carbon neutral in 10 years, and we do look at things like solar. I mean, everybody here is using electricity or propane or whatever, wood burning, kerosene. We need to be looking at things like when we have these outbursts of water, getting that, dealing with our impervious surfaces and getting that water into the ground as quickly as possible. We need to push for net metering so that we're producing our own electricity and we're able to, especially us that are in condos, right? We're paying these enormous electric bills. But I think of, what would draw a millennial to this community. They are talking about these things. They want to live in communities that are sustainable. They want to know that they're putting their money into use in a good way. So if we are serious about building a sustainable community and a viable community with every generation working together, then we do need to be thinking about carbon sequestration and producing our own energy.
I'm going to say something very similar. I think that's great. I think, a lot of ski resorts are energy independent. They do it through solar, through wind turbines, etc. There's no reason Waterville couldn't do that. What a great thing to say, our town is off the grid. I mean, we have our own wastewater treatment, we have our own police force, our fire department. What a great thing to say we're energy independent. We should have recycling, energy efficiency, sustainability, all these things, electric charging stations. There's all, and the technology is there now. The cost for alternative energy is actually becoming less than, right, than oil. So I think it's a missed opportunity. It would be a great marketing thing for Waterville to differentiate themselves also from other communities.
Sorry. I don't want to quash anybody's opinions or ideas, but a lot of these ideas are expensive. Yes, and I say that because I haven't heard of an economic study done to determine how much it costs to live in Waterville. I'm willing to bet that there aren't many people here who have a household income of less less than $40,000. So, you know, I don't know, on a household income of $40,000, who can afford all these things?
So that's where I think it's important to, my view, these aren't the recommendations necessarily, but they're gonna form the vision. And the master plan, it drives the zoning, it drives programs and policies, capital improvements, so it becomes a kind of litmus test. Is this policy or program or expenditure gonna move us closer in this direction? That's how.
To his point about cost, there have been studies done that show the payback for solar. At one point, it was very expensive. It was a long period of time. Now it's gone down to less than 5 years, or even less than that. So there have been studies done that show alternative energy is actually more affordable. And if the town could do something with a wind turbine, you could probably give electricity to everybody as part of their current tax basis.
No one would want to see the turbines.
Well, that's another issue, but I mean, that is a
There's also the issue of the
possibility.
national forest going into the land around the door, but, so, I wanna,
Yeah, it's solar.
something that hasn't been touched on,
Can I,
yes?
this, young lady's a school teacher here, I think. She said something about photovoltaic and maybe us becoming energy independent. It is absolutely possible. I'm a burnt oil guy and I'm not a photovoltaic guy, but there's a town in Germany that is totally independent and they have their own grid and we could create what's called no, it's not a microgrid, it's not a real grid. So everyone would share in that grid. There's a company called Sonnen, and we know that there's battery companies all over the world, Tesla, et cetera. So we have to get everybody to buy into it, but you want people to be in the school system, you want to bring people to town. If we did something like this, and we became energy independent, and we became a town that people looked at and saw that as something that was attractive, you'd fill the school with kids, you'd be energy independent, and we'd be a special town. This is already Mayberry RFD. We're all here because of that. And I pay double my taxes to make more kids come to school, although that wouldn't happen. But I like being here because it's Mayberry RFD. And I don't want to bring a bunch of people because they want to come and hang out at the mountain and come and hang out in town. The grocery store doesn't have food because there's not enough people. I mean, we get it. But I know, but to bring people here for an important reason is better than just bringing them here to get drunk, get mollies, and have fun.
Right, so I wanna just do 3 more things. I wanna ask a question, see if there's anybody that had a point that's really pressing that just wasn't covered, and then, let Terry, tell you how you can attend the master plan discussions if you want to. So my question, as I'm listening to the conversation, is do we have to worry if we did too well and attracted too many people, or does the size of the community physically ensure that it will still have the small town feel? At what point do we need to worry about that, or are there things we need to do to make sure we keep the small town feel if we're really successful at growing? Yes?
So we need to know how many residents we need and how many homes we need to start.
Yeah, but more theoretically.
But that's
not
already been
amended,
done.
but-
The town has a zoning plan.
Right.
It has developable opportunity. You can't build on the White Mountain National Forest.
Right.
So there's limited land that you can actually do
Well,
something.
that's my question. Does
So,
the
so even if you
physical
took
parameters-
all the vacant parcels and put 10-unit condos, I'm not suggesting this, but if you put 10-unit condos on every parcel, the town would still have more than adequate services.
You'd
I'm
still
assuming,
have-
you're
and
not
you
gonna
still have the small
you're not
town
gonna
feel.
overburden it. The traffic, I get a kick of being from Boston. I get a kick when people say, gee, the traffic here is terrible. What traffic? The only time I see traffic is 4th of July. So I think we have a great place, and I think we can do some things to make it better. And I do think, by increasing density, getting people to be here, there's a whole host of things that are interrelated. It would actually help the town.
Yeah, what is our goal? Bring in more people or to keep the community viable?
It can be both.
It's not viable. It's not viable. Why?
our community is not viable now, it needs to be bigger and more diverse.
Yes.
What kind of information? Why? Because businesses are not sustainable as with people who are here now.
So it's just shot in the arm
You can't
kind of
ask the
thing.
business owners to keep the businesses open all the time if they can't afford to do that, there's not enough people to buy their goods.
Okay, any last thoughts that
You asked a question about whether we needed to worry
Yep.
about being too successful.
Right.
Tour boats have destroyed Key West. I don't think there's a chance that tour buses loaded with old people are going to destroy Waterville Valley. I don't think we need to worry.
Okay.
Answering your question.
All right. Different opinion, Rich?
Yeah, one comment, it deals with the businesses, but it also deals with general what we're talking about, I think. And that is, the businesses aren't here for us to live here. They're here because we're a resort, and we have a lot of people who come here to take advantage of everything that we offer. So this is a dilemma I think we face as a town. We're not a small town. We're not, you know, that Mayberry RFD sort of thing. We still watch it every week on that channel too. But I mean, we are a resort town, and that makes us a little different. And I'll turn it over to Tim now because he's staring at me.
Sorry, I just wanted to take that because I've been thinking about that a ton lately. And if you look at other resorts throughout America, when you look at the ideal resort, say Stowe, right? Stowe is beautiful, right? They've done a great job developing that mountain. They don't have us. Stowe is separated by 12 miles from the town of Stowe. They don't have a community that populates those business fronts. I went there during off-season and it was a complete ghost town. This is an opportunity, it's not a threat. Just want to point that out.
Something to add?
Absolutely. We have a number of privately run businesses, some of which are run very well, like the golf course. Others are pretty damn shabby, and I wish the town would take a more aggressive position vis-a-vis insisting upon high-quality delivery of the privately owned businesses.
Yes. Yay.
Yes.
I don't think that's a municipal authority.
That's my wish, only dear.
Yeah. Any issues, thoughts, strengths, assets that we didn't touch on that somebody did?
I just have a final thought, it has to do, and it's a planning board issue. As you're planning the further development of the land in town, if you build more townhouses, it's only resident, only weekend people are gonna come up and meet. Are you adding to the problem, or are you solving it? I don't know the answer to that, but it seems like you're just piling on with an issue that we already have, which is too many housing units being occupied and owned by people who only work part-time.
But
Can I-
that's a
can I-
discussion first. That kind of relates to the issue of jobs and some of the other things we've
Right.
been talking about, how do you solve that?
So, yes.
I think a good phrase for that is there's too many empty beds in our town, cold beds. Too many cold beds.
Empty
There-
beds.
You know, obviously our town doesn't have a problem selling properties. It seems that the changeover of condos happens quickly. Some of the houses take forever, but the condos switch pretty fast. But those people aren't here. And if you wanna have a town, we need people in the town. If you wanna have a resort town, that's a different town.
That's right.
But what I heard from everybody tonight is that we want a town, we want a school, we want a grocery store, we want a community. And I think that the cold beds is probably one of our hardest parts.
I thought the ideas that she had and you had about energy independence really exciting. If we were a special town offering those opportunities, I think it would attract a lot of people.
Any other final thoughts?
What is our goal? What's the goal? Do we want more tourists to bring money in, or do we want more residents?
What I'm hearing is both.
What's the goal?
What I'm hearing is some of it.
What's the schedule?
I think you need both. I think the mountain and the town, if they were succeed unless we have the mountain people coming in, or the hiking, or the bikers, or whoever. We as the people that are here full time, if our town doesn't have the opportunity of having the little restaurants and things, maybe we don't want to stay either. We need all of these things to work effectively together. So I think that's a big thing. We need to come up with a plan that all of us are going to buy into. Residents, people that are here part-time, that love the valley, eventually want to come, people that have their children in school. All of us have to work together. That's got to be what the master plan is.
Yeah, as we think about just the tourists and the residents and the way things work, I think we just have to keep in mind still though, if the mountain's not there and all of those people that are weekenders here aren't here coming to the weekend spending money, the town declines. Right, and that's something to really keep in mind, because they're here. And whether they're not voting members or not, they're still the lion's share of a lot of the tax revenue that comes in that supports everything else that the residents have, and we've got to keep that kind of in mind. And I love the idea of that energy independence we've talked about. When we think about when the hurricane happened, we're all shut off, right? That's something that's there. There's a kernel of something there that's marketable that differentiates Waterville Valley from everything else in New England, that maybe it is energy independence as a town. I'm not saying it's there, but it's something that's worth investigating, because that's marketable.
At the end of the road, but we don't need it.
All right, so before I turn it over to Terry, I want to thank everybody. This has been a really good conversation, and I think we have a lot of useful information that will really help the planning board. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Say
yes.
It's my pleasure when people actually turn out and have a lot to say. So,
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming. Had some great ideas, a lot of ideas, I think a lot of discussion. We'll go forward, we'll try to develop a master plan that will be helpful to the town. And those who want to contribute further are more than welcome to come to the planning board meetings. We meet on the second Thursdays every month. And it's open to the public.
At what time?
At
5:30?
8 o'clock p.m.
8 in the morning. That's
Right, so you need to either alternate.
It's one of the ideas we have.
Yeah.
Are the master plan committee meetings also listed on the website so people can attend them?
They're not at this point, and we can address that. At the,
There would be another way, 'cause
one of
there
the
are-
things we will address is the availability of something like an online situation.
Because I know the planning board members are working on different chapters, and when they meet, that's a public meeting too, so there'll be another opportunity to come
And they are volunteers, so you have to understand. This is a volunteer community, and you desire volunteers, so I understand what you would all like, and it might be different in the town, maybe run a little differently, but I have to understand that.
So Terry, is there a possibility, once you have a draft, draft of a master plan, that you have another meeting, or put it online, so people could review and comment, and things like that? I know I would like to do that. And then what is your time frame for finalizing that?
Well, we don't really have a time frame at this moment, but your idea about coming up with a, like a draft and having it available to the public and possibly another meeting is a good idea. I think that's what we're trying to do, is to get as much input as we can, so that we do have a master plan that takes all your ideas into account. Obviously, some ideas are vastly different and opposite of other ideas, so there's going to be some sort of compromise of all of them. We'll do the best we can.
I was surprised how kind of close they are. I mean, I was surprised by positively how close a lot of the ideas are. And they're kind of going in a similar direction, so I thought that was
Yeah, I think that is
pretty
very
interesting.
good. We've got a lot to discuss, and further ideas will be helpful.
I think it's also important if you do send out a draft to remind folks who maybe didn't participate tonight that a vision is supposed to be aspirational. I think somebody alluded to it earlier, that this isn't necessarily what we absolutely want to do. We may not be able to afford to do it all, but it's aspirational. It's like, in an ideal world, this is what we'd like to be as a town and a community. And we'd like to take the steps to get there. It might take us years. And I think that's important to let folks know. I can see somebody reading this or a draft who wasn't bus in here thinking, oh my God, there goes my taxes.
Well, they'll say that, yeah.
So I think that's important to call out.
Okay, well, again, yeah.
Are these gonna be posted somewhere on your website or something?
The results here?
I'll be giving you a
These-
report that
well-
looks more like a report, that would be something you could put on the website.
I would like this, Rajat, if I could get it, speaking for the wigwag, we want to report on this, I think people are interested.
Sure.
Would the minutes be online?
Yeah, I mean, this one looks more like a report.
This did not happen.
Okay, thank you again for coming, thank you for the ideas.
I already lost. Thank you.
And you, very, very good. Tapping that on. Thank God for spell check.
Spelling is one of the worst things ever.
So you can email it.